Hello and welcome to Adventures in Venueland, an EVMC podcast. Join us for this all-access pass backstage and behind the scenes with some of the brightest minds that cross the scope of the live event industry. I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. We'll introduce you to incredible guests who journey with us as we dive deep into the world of venues, tours, festivals, and everything in between. Grab your laminate and meet us in Venueland.
So what's it like when your venue is on everyone else's bucket list? Well, we're going to find out. Today's adventure takes us to the future home of EVMC 2024. Talking about Denver, Colorado, and we're going to check in today with the Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer for Red Rocks Amphitheater and the Denver Performing Arts Complex. Please join us. Say hello to Brian Kitts. Brian, great to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk to you guys.
We are so excited to be coming your way, but let's answer that question first. What's it like to be the venue that every marketer, everybody who works in venues, you're on everybody's bucket list? What is that like?
It's not horrible, I'll tell you that. I think that any of us who are, first off, I think all of us are lucky to be in this business because everybody thinks that this is fun. As a marketing guy, marketing Red Rocks is not particularly hard. And on some days, I think I've got the easiest job in the world. On other days, I think that the spotlight that comes with big venues or cool venues can be a little bit more glaring than some traditional venues. And so, there are ups and downs with any job.
I remember the early days of MTV because I'm that old, right? So the early 80s when they were showing a lot of music videos and, there'd be live clips they'd play. But one of the videos that was always in rotation was U2 live at Red Rocks. And it was a live video that was shot during a daytime concert, or at least the sun hadn't gone down yet. And I just remember looking at this venue and thinking, what kind of place is this that's hosting concerts? And I want to go there someday. Still haven't been, but guess what? Obviously, as EVMC heads your way, I'm excited. What was your first exposure to Red Rocks?
It was probably that video, like lots of other people. I went to school here in Denver, and I'll be honest, I think I sort of took Red Rocks for granted when I was here. Because it's a place you would go and hike and, go to a show. But, I think that, as you go to other venues and you get to do other stuff, Red Rocks sort of, became very special. And, I've said this before, what I love about being at Red Rocks is that, it's 80 plus years old as a venue, but 300 million years old as a space.
Right.
And I think that comes with special scenery. It comes with special stories. And, there just aren't many venues that you can talk about 80 plus years of music and pop culture history. And I'm a nerd about that stuff. And I love that about the venue.
Do you remember any shows you went to there when you were, growing up in Denver? Any memorable ones, or maybe your first show that you attended?
So I didn't grow up here. My exposure started when I was in college. And unlike some people, I remember every single one of them. And by now there have been hundreds of those shows, especially working. And, I'm going to date myself, but, whether you're talking about Cracker and the Gin Blossoms and Spin Doctors, that's one that I remember from being in college. And then, last night is the first night that I'd ever seen Tyler Childers, and the full moon was coming. Yeah, and the full moon was coming up, and a little breeze, and it's a magical place. And there's not a single night that I've been there that I haven't thought this is pretty cool. And that's as a fan, not as a marketing guy.
We're going to talk about some of your other venues as well. I want to make sure, we're not just hyper focused on Red Rocks, but
Sure.
for that person who's never been, Let's talk a little bit about what the venue is, where it's located, and what, like you have a season. Give us the 101 on Red Rocks.
Stuck between two giant sandstone monoliths about 20 minutes outside of Denver. So it's accessible mostly. It is in the foothills. And so chances are you're going to have to hike up to the venue or hike out of the venue. There are no escalators or elevators. And so it still feels really rustic. It's a National Historic Landmark. It was built to get people out of the Depression as a Works Project Administration program. And so that's, the history goes back that far. Opened in 1941 with just 5 or 6 shows. This year we'll do 200 shows.
Wow.
Oh my God.
We do Saturday, in addition to the concerts, we'll do Saturday morning yoga and Snow Shape, which is a program to get in shape for the ski season. And then it's open to the public at all other times. It is a government-owned facility it's owned by the city and county of Denver. And so it's a park. It's a park at times when it's not functioning as a venue. So it's pretty. You're as likely to see skunks and rattlesnakes and owls as you are humans. And, that's part of the fun too. Weather is generally predictable, but it's Colorado weather. And that means that there's going to be, this year our opening night was canceled because of a wildfire and hurricane force winds. We had a little incident with hail earlier in the year.
Made a little news there, yeah.
Yeah, Sophie Tucker was on stage when it was blizzarding, and then Billy Strings did 2 nights of, in torrential downpours. But 9,000 fans show up every night. So
it's got to be a interesting thing for whoever is doing booking, where you do have it on this, bucket list for so many bands wanting to play it. You have bands that are underplaying to try to do it. They might be playing way bigger venues elsewhere, and they're like, we're going to hit Red Rocks. And so is there this challenge where, maybe the demand is so high that I'm sure that booking person's having to kind of fill all the holes and do what they can, but then sometimes it just doesn't work and it's like, we'll catch you on the next season?
We're an open venue, and so we've got a unique process. And for people who like booking stuff, we open the following year's season in April or May, and it's literally a first come, first serve. And so Live Nation and AEG and others, sort of rush to get their emails in, with a date request and who's going to play on that date. And so we already know for 2024 who's going to be there every night. Yes, you're right about the underplay. I'm going to point to Tyler Childers again. Last night and tonight he's going to do 2 nights at Red Rocks, but then go down 10 miles away and play Fiddler's Green, which is 18,000 people. So there are people who will take Red Rocks because it's the pretty venue and the mid-size venue, and then go do something else. And that hurts sometimes when we lose shows to Ball Arena or Fiddler's Green, but we still end up with plenty of business.
So you kind of, what's the season like? When does it start? What window are those 200 shows in?
It's whenever we think people are going to show up. April 1st. The first year that I worked at Red Rocks, it was basically Memorial Day to Labor Day and 75 shows. That is now moved from April 1st to the middle of November and 200 shows.
Wow.
So,
jeez.
The reality is, that if you're going to book there or play there, that there's every chance that you're going to get snowed on in April and May and October and November, but there's also a chance you won't. So,
and sometimes those moments can be kind of, depending on how annoying or hazardous, can be kind of more memorable. To your point, got Billy Strings shredding out in the middle of the rain, and people probably, they could have flown in from all over the country to go.
Sure.
I think I knew people from Kentucky that went out to that show, and it sucks because it's in the rain, but now it's like an even more memorable experience because you're now out in this elements in the rain, listening to one of your favorite artists in one of the most iconic venues. I mean, so I think that's, it's not like you're going to some, rinky-dink shed down the road, and you're like, oh God, it's raining outside. Now you're like, it's raining and it's in Red Rocks.
Right. And that's fair. That's part of the story. I think it's not necessarily part of the charm, if you're cold and wet, but everybody, makes it through, and that does become part of the story. And, to your point about the U2 video, that wouldn't have necessarily happened if, they came so close to canceling that particular show, and U2 said, look, we're here. It's hard to get here. Let's go ahead and do it. And sort of the mist and the rain and everything is what made that magical. And, Zach Bryan did a show in the snow last November, and it was spectacular. We've got awesome pictures of Florence and the Machine out there. She's barefoot dancing and twirling around with this giant coat on while the snow was falling. So
it's wild.
It's, I'm not going to lie, it's better to have a night like tonight or last night where you've got a clear night and a full moon and it's, 70 degrees. But
right. Especially from the op side. Yeah.
Yeah.
So beyond Red Rocks, you are, obviously a big piece of the Denver Performing Arts Complex. Talk to us about your other venues.
Yeah, so the city had the foresight. There are obviously other cities who have venues, but the city has a bunch of venues that my group owns and operates. And so that is Red Rocks. It's the Denver Coliseum, which is one of those 75-year-old, 8,000 person sheds. It still has wooden seats and lots of dirt shows. The Colorado Convention Center, which is exactly what it sounds like what it is, and the Denver Performing Arts Complex, which is Broadway, ballet, symphony, and opera, along with, some multi-purpose shows. So lots of venues. I think the interesting thing is the city portfolio will have more seats available than all of the sports venues in town combined. And I think that's something that fans and, residents don't necessarily understand, because it's nerdy government stuff. But, I get the luxury of, getting to work with those demographics, and, I oversee all of our ticketing, all of our sponsorships, and all of our communications. And so each of them, it's fun for me because each of them has, a little bit different product offering, which means different sponsors and different ticketing and different, different audiences.
And I think of really Denver as obviously all the venues you mentioned that you oversee, but even the arena, the stadium, so many theaters. There's so many theaters there that it's like when I'm trying to think of really big, just live event markets in the States, I think of, maybe it's my own view of it, but I think of Denver as like one of those almost like top 5 markets where you've just got all these iconic and just so many different levels too. There's clubs and stuff. So like we've talked to people in Minneapolis, which I think is kind of comparable in that they also have a ton of theaters and stadiums and stuff. And so I think it is this really cool opportunity for, growth for bands and people to play there. They can come in and play a club and they can work their way up to that Red Rock show. And so I think, I don't know, it's really a great city for live entertainment.
Yeah, it is. And it's a great city for live entertainment. I came from the sports side. It's a great sports town. But, I think Denver's nice because it's in the middle of the country. So if you're on your way from Albuquerque to Salt Lake or from the Midwest to the West Coast, we're on your way. And, that means that we do get, lots of little clubs. And then Red Rocks is that mid-size venue. And there are a couple of 18,000 seat venues. But, Taylor Swift and Madonna can still, swing through and, play, big multi-night, dates as well. So it's a great market. It's a young market. And I think, that means that there's lots of money and lots of willingness to get out and get around. We compete in weird ways with things that other people or other markets don't. Our prime competitor for that discretionary dollar is the outdoor industry. The ski industry, $200 a pop to ski for a day is, more than a night out at Red Rocks, but that's our competition. And so I think we're always sort of keeping an eye on that too.
So when you got that many, you got all the venues, all the shows happening. how do you decide what events you're at and what events you're not at? How many of these events are you attending to make sure you're there and things get handled the way that you want?
I think it's like any other marketer. You pick and choose the ones that you think you're going to have clients at. But, I think we're also in a really, this is a great business, and I think we're all fortunate to be in it. I can go to a show at Red Rocks, somebody that I'm not sure I want to see, and either stay for the show or bail after the third song. And I haven't lost anything by doing that. And, you get some really pleasant surprises that way. Dolly Parton, you think, well, I don't know that I'm ever going to get to see her again. And this was, I think, the year before COVID, and same with Diana Ross, where it's like, these could be really cool shows, and, I'll go and stay for 3 songs, and you end up just being blown away by, some of those legacy acts, especially. And it's like, oh, damn, I was lucky I got to see that. So
yeah, sometimes 3 songs is an eternity, but other times you're pleasantly surprised and you're like,
absolutely,
I'm gonna stick around and watch this. I'm gonna actually stick around and watch some of this. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's always an experience, and I always like, oh, I see what other people really like about this. So it's such a great bonus of our jobs.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how we're heading out with EVMC, formerly EAMC, out your way. And of course, our last time out there, Paul, you were saying it was what, 2006?
2005?
2005. Yeah.
2005.
So I know, Brian, you've been a big part of behind the scenes back from even those days with EAMC. Tell us a little about your experience working with the group.
2000. So when I got the call about, would you be interested in having EVMC back in Denver? It's like, well, yes. And I've done this before. And then you forget that it was like 12,000 years ago when I was a baby. I think it speaks to the cool longevity of our group, the need for us to sort of have that communal marketing talk. Some of the sponsors that were there in 2005 are still around, now. And so I think that makes it really fun. I think Denver's a fun town, for all the reasons we just talked about. And, I'm always proud to be associated with the group. And, it's honestly, I had, Michelle from MSG was here last week for the Sting shows. And, one of the biggest thrills for me is getting, to invite my EVMC friends to, say hello when they're coming to Red Rocks. And, I think it doesn't have to be Red Rocks. I think that's part of what we do, taking friends and family.
Yeah,
so
sure.
This is inviting some of those old timers back to Denver. But, I think for a lot of people, it's going to be a first look at Red Rocks and a first look at our city.
When we talk about Denver, and we have a fair amount, but, for people that may have come back in 2005 to now, what do you think have been some of like the biggest changes in the city, aside from the cost of living? Because I know that is kind of, because I have a sister in Denver. I hear about it.
Yeah. Exponential growth. I think that at some point, especially younger residents realized that, the outdoor industry was a really great, Denver is just ideal for young people. And I think that, as oil started to wane, as, part of the area's industry, tech moved in, and then the outdoor industry, and then cannabis. And so I think we've had sort of this exponential growth in different industries that have made it really, really a growing city. And along with that, it became a good restaurant town and a great sports town and a great entertainment town.
You mentioned cannabis. So let's talk about that. It's something, that we hear about a lot all across the country, is how, that has changed Denver a little bit. But how has it impacted what you do at the venues?
I'm not going to lie. It was difficult at first. I will be completely transparent in being an advocate for the industry. I don't think that it should be treated any differently than liquor. It's taxed the same way. It is regulated the same way at the state level. And I think that, from the federal level, it's important to do that. I think we've still got a weird set of rules that apply to tobacco. A tobacco smoker would never think to light up in the middle of Red Rocks. Pot smokers do. And I think we need to start treating everybody sort of the same.
Right.
As a recreational industry, Colorado was the first to get into this. And the first night that it was legal, when we had a show at Red Rocks, was interesting because traditionally one of our first shows of the year is the Easter sunrise service. The first performance coincided with that Easter sunrise service. So we had a little bit of God in the morning and then Snoop Dogg that night. And you can imagine what that was like, because we, as that April date opened up, the New York Times and every major media outlet wanted to know what it was going to be like when Colorado finally legalized recreational use. And fortunately, other states have done that, and so it's taken some of the tourism pressure off. But it's a major industry, and I think we should treat it that way, including how we do regulation in venues. And my dream as a marketing and sponsorship guy is to have our own strain of weed, the way that we have our own special beer that's Red Rocks branded. So
there you go. You're the first one to have that idea here on the podcast.
It really is interesting to kind of visit some of these other markets. Like I do remember going to Toronto where it's legal, and at their amphitheater there, they've got vendors just like you would have Budweiser set up.
Yeah, I remember that.
You have different vendors there that are handing out promo items, and it is fascinating just because there isn't this sort of universality across the states, that sometimes market to market there are these really interesting uses of sponsorship when it comes to something like that.
Right. And we've had sponsors when we do walkthroughs at the venue who say we can't believe that this is happening here, because they're from southern states, and they said we still consider this the devil's weed,
right.
Where we're from. It's like, yeah, I get that, but welcome to Colorado. So
welcome to Colorado. Well, kind of taking things back a little bit, you said you weren't from Denver originally. So where are you from before Denver?
Yeah, I grew up in New Mexico, and my parents had horses and cattle and llamas and stuff like that, and then came to school at the University of Denver. Went to work for Walt Disney Pictures and 20th Century Fox right out of grad school. And that was sort of my entrance into the entertainment industry. I hated LA, and that will be a disappointment for lots of our EVMC friends, but ended up
wasn't
back
for you. Yeah,
it wasn't for me. I loved the work, but didn't like traffic and all that stuff, but ended up back in Denver, and just sort of randomly ended up with the sports teams at a time when Stan Kroenke was getting ready to buy them and sort of transform the face of sports in Denver. And, I think that's a fascinating, from somebody who likes the business side of our industry, not just the marketing side. It was fun because, Stan bought an Arena Football League team and an indoor lacrosse team and a Major League Soccer team, and built a stadium and bought venues downtown and built a sports network. And I got to be on the, the front line of all of that. And then, got recruited to the Red Rocks position. So I've never done anything really besides sports and entertainment marketing, and am not qualified to do anything else at this point, which is fine.
But now this is kind of cool though. Am I right that you were actually spent a good number of years and maybe still do as a professor at the University of Denver?
I do. I started there. A woman who had been teaching the course had been coming to, at the time was Pepsi Center, is now Ball Arena, and I'd been giving her class tours, and she goes, you'd be better at teaching this class than I would. Are you interested? And it is, I generally love my job, but I love the teaching aspect more. I will always learn more from the kids in my class than I will learn at any conference or any, convention that I will go to. And it's, they can be annoying because they're college kids. But when it comes down to it, it's the most fun that I have.
What are you teaching?
I teach sports and entertainment marketing. So again, I'm not qualified to do anything else. They've asked if I would, consider the intro class. It's no.
Yeah.
So
it seems like it's a nice advantage too, to where, if you're doing marketing, you now have all these kids and they can kind of keep you up to date with whatever the latest trends are. You can run things past them. Like, what do you think about this? And they'll be like, Professor Kitts, that is so last week. Like, what are you doing? You were embarrassing yourself.
Well, it's true. And I remember there was a point at some point early in the quarter where I asked, what was the last song you downloaded? And they were just crickets. And just in the year since probably the last time I'd asked that question, nobody was downloading anymore and streaming had totally kicked in. And I think if you're not dealing with that segment of the industry on a daily basis, you don't know that.
Right.
But
right.
It's a real, I won't say it's a rude awakening, but it's a jolt when somebody says, we haven't downloaded anything in a long time.
Is there something, I think it is one of the things we kind of picked up interviewing various people on this podcast is, of course, everyone has their own unique story, and some people find their way into the industry and, they've been in it for 2 years, and other people have been in it and that's all they know and they love it. But I think you being in it for as long as you have and kind of being in entertainment might give you some unique perspective when it comes to, like if you're looking back at like the beginning of your career and where you are now, it is more of a linear trajectory than I think some people have. And do you ever think back, is there like advice that you think you would give, baby Brian, as he's exiting college, or maybe it's when you move back to Denver and you get that sports job and now you are where you are, are there things you kind of look back on and kind of wish you ever did differently, or things that you maybe would have changed, or something, pitfalls you would have avoided?
The Colorado Avalanche were in the Stanley Cup. I had a weird superstition where I would have to have a Carl's Jr. before every single game.
That's my kind of superstition.
Well, it's fun until you realize you put on like 30 pounds during the playoffs, and it's easier to put on than it is to get off. So sports superstitions are stupid, no matter how many we do. I guess advice is I would have paid much more attention to audiences as opposed to the product. And I think there's a real difference there. You are providing a fan experience, and I get really geeky talking about the fan experience, and, it's how you buy a ticket. Did your ticketing system break down? And then when you get to the venue, are your bathrooms clean? Somebody blowing weed smoke in your face. I see all the complaints that come into our venues. And I think thinking about what those experiences are like, once you make a decision to shell out, X number of dollars for the ticket, I would pay more attention to the way that you make people feel. I think we all learned this during COVID, that I think we take for granted that people are always going to be able to get together, and it's just not true. And I think, I got furloughed during COVID like lots of people. And so I will never take for granted the ability to get together again. And if somebody's going to give me $50 to see a show, I want you to feel great when you leave. And baby Brian would have paid much more attention to what happens when fans are in the seats, as opposed to, oh, look, we're going to have, so-and-so on stage. That's cool, but they're going to do their job. I have to do my job in a completely different way.
I love that. And I think so often those other ancillary things for the audience can really make or break a show. You'll have people that they saw their favorite artist and it's a sold out crowd and yay, and everyone's happy and the promoter's happy. And then you do get that angry email and someone had this awful experience where they were waiting in line here too long or whatever. And so it's not often you hear from them and say, well, their bass or their treble was too loud. It's like, where she didn't hear this. She didn't play this song that I wanted her to play,
Right.
Instead, you hear about that. So I love that perspective. I mean, it really should be about, the audience experience and kind of putting yourself in their shoes almost more than really everything else. It kind of will take care of itself.
Yeah. And, I think, for any marketer, I think it's easy to, use your past to get in the building and, not have to go through those normal processes. But, I still think it's important for people, in our position to buy a ticket, walk in through the same doors that your fans have to walk in, go through that scanning and that security process. And, did it feel okay? Did it take too long? And then, go and buy that snack. And I'm okay paying $14 for a beer at Red Rocks because that's part of the experience. But was the beer hot? Stuff like that matters. Right. And so,
yeah, it really does.
And then again, my biggest frustration is always with our guest services staff. Did they mouth off to somebody, or are they as helpful as they could have been? Stuff like that. And I don't think that in the industry until it's too late.
Brian, one of the other cool things that you're involved with is You Can Play. And would you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, sure. I am a co-founder of the You Can Play project. And the project started because this is, on the sports side, there were three of us who have family or who were part of the community ourselves who didn't like the way that sports were treating LGBTQ people. And so You Can Play works to develop allies, specifically athletes and coaches, to say that they would be accepting of LGBTQ people in their sport. And started out just as we thought we would make one video with some, NHL all-stars. And, 12 years later, it's become an important voice, I think, in diversity and inclusion for LGBTQ people, athletes, fans, and allies who want gay athletes to play.
And you've been doing this for about 12, a little over 12 years now?
Yep. Not something I ever thought that I would do. And my younger brother would have probably been a great soccer player, but was a gay kid and walked away from the sport. And I think that we all recognize that there are a lot of athletes who walked away from their sport because of, unintentional discrimination.
Sure.
And
so I think that's one of the things that we work to curb.
I love how you're looking at not just, the team and the fan behavior, but also, what happens in the locker room. And I just think it's some great stuff you're doing there.
Thanks. It's one of those things where I think that if you're going to do this type of work, we got tired of waiting for gay athletes to come out. And I wouldn't come out if I were a gay athlete knowing what the media attention is going to be
Sure.
like. But I think that early on, the voices were important because here you've got pro athletes who are willing to say, yep, if you can play, you can play. It doesn't matter if you're straight or, gay or, what your ethnicity or religion is, because, those discriminations are still in place as well. So, it's been fun. I'm the first guy that's ever talked to the United Nations about LGBTQ issues in sports, much to my mom's amazement. I never thought that you would basically amount to that. She didn't say it quite like that, but that's what she meant.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
Did you get her like a napkin from the lobby and hand it to her or something?
So, it's been a tremendous opportunity. It's been a real privilege, I think, to be able to talk to, people about something that means something to me. Again, looking back at baby Brian, I don't think that's ever, nobody would have ever said you should find something outside of your work that you think is important and lean in on that too. But it's been very fulfilling.
If somebody wants to learn more about that organization or anything, what's the best place for them to check it out?
youcanplayproject.org is the website.
Very cool. So we talked a lot about, your work and obviously the venues, your side projects and a lot of stuff going on. But what are you away from work? Help me a little bit about Brian when you're not at the office, so to speak.
Probably not different than lots of people. I'm married to a doctor who I think, especially during COVID, I got some unique perspective on, again, whether, how important it was for us to be able to, get together. I think it also gave me a perspective that, gives me a perspective on my own career. When you're married to a doctor, you're very aware that there are people who are curing cancer and, doing very, very important things. And, for a while, I was kind of self-conscious about what I do. I tell my students now, and I would tell anybody who's getting into the industry, that your ability to make somebody feel good for 2 or 3 hours, forget their mortgage or their divorce or their screamy kids, that's noble. And I think that's a great reason to do this type of work. Love being outdoors myself. Love pop culture. I've got family close by, no kids, no pets, can barely take care of myself in my yard. But love
so much yard work to do. I don't even talk about it.
I know. But also love to travel. I'm a music geek on top of everything else. And so I love going to other people's venues and seeing shows just as much as I love having them come to Red Rocks.
I do have to publicly thank you again for this. I know I brought it up to you a couple times more recently, but I remember emailing you with a cold email, and it's probably been 13 years ago or 14 years ago. It was a long time ago. I was basically a coordinator at Rupp Arena at the time. And one of my sisters who lives there was graduating, and we were all the family was descending on Denver. I'd never been to Red Rocks. So of course, like everyone under the moon, I was like, I've got to see Red Rocks. I don't care if it's Sesame Street Live. I'm going to go rock out to Big Bird in the middle of Red Rocks. And so I look at the calendar. We're only there for like 3 or 4 days. And sure enough, their shows, of course, but it's the Fray, and they're from Denver, which I didn't know. And they were all sold out, all shows. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And me and my sisters, we were going to have this like sibling night out. And I'm like, well, I'm screwed. But I was like, you know what? Let me just do some Google searching, some nice investigatory work. And I found your email and I'm like, I'm going to send this guy a cold email. I've never met him before, but we both work at venues. What's it going to hurt? And I email you. And I think I introduced myself as a venue nerd. And I was like, I work at an arena in Lexington. And then I remember you replied and you said, oh, arena nerd, that's so fun. Can I be like a part of that club? And you said, and then ta-da! You managed, yeah, exactly. And then you managed to get us tickets for one of the nights, which is still one of my favorite shows I've ever been to, because it's the only one I've ever gone to with both my sisters. And it was at Red Rocks. And what made it even more memorable is I still kind of follow the Denver Broncos, but I was more into them at the time. And I remember we went to that show, and the Broncos had just signed Peyton Manning, and he came to the show, and he was like in the front row, and no one really knew. But then the Fray saw him, and they were like, Peyton Manning is here. And they're like, Peyton Manning, you got to take care of business. And then everyone freaked out, and Peyton Manning turned around and waved. And I was like, I was having an out of body experience at this point.
The full Denver. You had the full Denver.
I just have to thank
that
you.
That is
again.
the full Denver.
I know it's, from someone that, you just, I don't know. It was very, very, very nice. And to someone that you didn't know and who just sent you a cold email, I really appreciated it.
We're all in the same boat, and community building, whether it's, making new friends or contacts, that's what we do. And, there's no such thing as sold out, no matter what anybody tells you. And, for friends, you can always find a way. So
very kind of you.
Glad to do it. Except for Taylor Swift at a venue that's not mine. I learned that,
and
the
that
hard
is
way.
Actually sold out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, before we let you go here, we want to hit you with our fast 5. It's 5 quick questions, just looking for your instant response. First up, do you remember your very first concert ever?
Yes.
And it was.
Do I have to tell you?
Yeah.
Shalimar.
Oh, wow. You were dancing in the sheets with Shalimar.
I was. I was really little.
Yeah. How about a favorite concert?
I probably have already mentioned it. I was stunned by Diana Ross and Dolly Parton. I'm going to lump them together. Diana Ross played Red Rocks 50 years to the week since the first time she played there.
Oh, wow.
And I think to see somebody who's the age of Diana Ross or Dolly Parton get out there and still hoof it the way they do and, still sound great is, there are days when I get out of bed and my knees hurt and I'm, not even close to that age. I don't know how they do it.
I hear you.
It's stunning to me.
We talked about how Red Rocks is on everybody's bucket list, but what's your bucket list venue you haven't been to yet?
Oh man, I have not been to the Gorge. I have not been to the Hollywood Bowl or the Greek. Believe it or not, after all this time, I finally made it to Nashville for the first time last year. And that was a semi-religious experience.
You get to do the Ryman?
Go to the Ryman.
Yeah.
That's a special place.
Yep.
All right. Somebody comes to Denver. They can go out for one meal. What's the one meal you got to go experience in Denver?
I don't know that we'll be able to do this for EVMC. Casa Bonita just opened here.
Yes.
And from
I'm
the
so glad
guys,
you brought Casa Bonita up.
from the guys who Trey and Matt, the guys behind South Park. It's kind of one of those iconic venues that had terrible food. I haven't been to the newly opened one. From a pure, shtick standpoint, I guess I would point to that one. Denver's a great restaurant town, though, and when people are ready to come here, I'm happy to recommend lots of good restaurants, not just the one that everybody's talking about right now.
Last question: what is your theme song? So there's a TV show where cameras follow you all around in your life there, the life of Brian, if you will. What is the theme song that plays over the opening credits to the Brian Show?
God, just because she's top of mind, all I can think of is Diana Ross and Love Hangover.
There you go.
There you go.
That's the one I'm going to wish I could take back, but here we are. So
But here we are. What do you want to plug? Give us if people want to follow Red Rocks or any of your venues there in Denver, or reach out to you. Throw out all the plugs there.
My email is a mouthful. It's brian.kitts@denvergov.org, but always happy to hear from people. Cold emails are welcome. All of our Red Rocks socials are easy to find. They're pretty. It's not just show stuff. We get lots of pictures of animals and, deer and snakes and stuff. And I think that's kind of cool. And, I will plug early and often, register for next summer. It's going to be, it's an easy place to get to. And, rain or shine, I think whatever night we end up at Red Rocks is going to be fun. And, great community experience with the EVMC crowd.
Brian, thank you so much for the time today. I can't wait to see you here in person. We're heading out soon for planning meetings, and then, of course, with the conference this summer. You can find Paul. Give a plug where people can, if they want to attend the conference. What's the website? Where should they visit so they can find out how they can be part of our event venue marketing conference for 2024?
Absolutely. It's eventvenuemarketing.com. And so you'll find all the details on there: registration links, costs, hotel, all the good stuff. And yeah, we look forward to seeing people out there. I think it's going to be a really exciting year. We're coming off of a record year in Seattle and going to an amazing market like Denver with some of these iconic venues we talked about just on this interview. So we'll see everyone there.
Brian, thanks again for the time today. It was great getting to know you a little bit better.
Yep, you're welcome. Glad to do it. And we'll see you guys in about 6 weeks.
And a big thanks to everybody for listening to this episode of Adventures in Venueland. Remember, you can subscribe and find more episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We do love your 5-star reviews so you can help others find us. Until the next adventure, I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Adventures in Venueland is a side project of the Event and Venue Marketing Conference, a marketing conference that brings together diversified event and venue professionals to cultivate education, collaboration, and innovation for the growing sports and live entertainment industry. Find out more at eventvenuemarketing.com.
Audio editing and mixing by Camille Faulkner.
Design and digital advertising by Megan Ebeck.
Copywriting and publicity by Samantha Marker.
Guest booking and brand strategies by Paul Hooper.
Guest research by Dave Rettelberger.
Marketing strategies by Paul Hooper, Megan Ebeck, and Samantha Marker. Thanks for joining us. Until the next adventure.